Pokémon is the biggest franchise in the entire world. It's got pretty much everything. You know, it's got games, books, films, spin-offs, cards, plushes, Monopoly, McDonald's, balloons, Heinz beans. But the most bizarre of them all, remakes. You know, taking the original games that everyone knows and loves and giving them a good old glow up. Or making them, you know, My relationship with the franchise goes back to, what, 2013? I don't know, whenever Pokémon X and Y released. And the one thing that always bugged me about these games was the fact that I wasn't able to save them. Well, I could, I just didn't know how to. And how was I supposed to know? If at some point in the game it was randomly mentioned, I would have just skipped over it anyway, because, you know, who has the time to read? Anyway, my friend told me how to save the game, and I absolutely loved it. Fast forward a couple of years, and by this point I had played every single Pokémon game. And yes, that does include the crap ones. Looking at you, Pokémon Yellow. But yeah, by this point I had played every single Pokémon game, and I was a little torn on the franchise, to be perfectly honest. For example, loved Pokémon Emerald, hated Sun and Moon, loved Pokémon Crystal, hated pretty much all of Generation 4. I know, call me a contrarian. If you like Generation 4, that's absolutely fantastic. If Staraptor's your favourite regional bird, you know, clearly you forgot about Corviknight and Talonflame and Toucanon and pretty much every other regional bird, but it's fine, it's whatever. I forgive you. But as I've already mentioned, I love Pokémon Emerald. It's probably the best Pokémon game I've ever played. And for those of you who have also played it, you know exactly what I'm talking about. Brilliant Pokémon, vibrant colour scheme, and it's the only game where I genuinely have a hard time choosing between the starters. It's the definitive Pokémon experience, and if you haven't played it, I would highly recommend getting an emulator or something, because you're missing out, man. But what if you want to experience the whimsy of Generation 3, you know, without committing a crime? Well, you can. That being in the form of Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire. Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire, otherwise known as ORAS, because when you're comparing Pokémon remakes, it's either this or ass. No, but these are remakes of Pokémon Ruby and Sapphire, which originated on the Game Boy Advance, otherwise known as the worst console of all time, because in order to actually play anything, you're gonna have to buy an attachable sperm looking thing. I don't own a Game Boy Advance anymore because I ate it, which is very unfortunate because it runs on batteries, so the only way I can actually experience the Hoenn region is by playing these fantastic remakes. So I've decided to make an entire video praising these games because, oh my word, they are so good. So without further ado, this is why I believe Pokémon Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire are the perfect remakes. So grab drink, grab a food, and if you don't mind, subscribe to the channel because it makes me smile when the number goes up. And I need to smile. Wait, what's happening? Why is it getting darker? Oh man, does this mean the intro's over? No, I like this intro. Anyway, before I go, sorry for wasting your time. So I wanted to start off by mentioning just how good this game looks. It might just be the best looking game on the entire 3DS. I mean, yeah, there are some games that look better, that being in the form of pretty much every single Monster Hunter game, but from what I've experienced, those games are stacked with performance issues. Well, for me at least. This game knew the limitations of the 3DS and worked it to a T. Everything runs smoothly, and even though it's a 3D Pokémon game, the graphics look consistently good throughout the entire game, so you don't have to worry about gross looking trees or gross looking everything. Overall, it's just a very pleasurable experience. A very refined Pokémon game, if you will. In fact, if someone came up to me and asked me to recommend them a Pokémon game, I would redirect them to these games in a heartbeat. But when compared to the original Gen 3 games, the graphics are definitely more of a preference kind of thing. If you prefer 2D Pokémon games, of course you're going to choose the originals over the remakes. So what defining features do the remakes have that give them kind of an edge over the originals? Well, there are a few tidbits here and there. For example, awesome gameplay mechanics such as the addition of Mega Evolution, which was even given to some of the original Gen 3 Pokémon. Some of them are cool, like Sceptile and Metagross, while some of them are better off forgotten, like Manectric and that stupid looking Camerupt with the volcano sticking out his back. And not to mention the primal forms, which are some of the greatest redesigns in human history. Speaking of redesigns, what a brilliant segue that is, Mauville City got revamped into oblivion. In the original games, it was just a normal rectangle of buildings, much like any other Pokemon town. But in the remakes, it's turned into a full-blown shopping district, and actually ends up being the largest area in all of the Hoenn region. And lest we forget the addition of Sea Mauville, which is a giant shipwreck with a whole bunch of random crap in it. And I guess you can also catch Lugia there as well. Now, individually, these details might not add a whole lot to the game, but when you combine all these different features together, you begin to realise just how big of an impact they make, adding all these quality of life features that make the experience a hell of a lot more enjoyable. But by far, the best feature they added was being able to fly around the entire region on the back of Mega Latias or Latios, or whatever version of the game you got. It looks super clean, runs super well, and is definitely the feature I got the most enjoyment out of. While flying around the Hoenn region, you can battle and catch various legendaries, as well as explore a large variety of Mirage Islands, which are scattered around the map. These islands house a whole bunch of foreign Pokemon you can't find in the Hoenn region, like Pineco. I can't remember anymore right now, but I do remember catching a Pineco at one point. There's a bunch of other stuff I either can't remember or haven't mentioned because I haven't been able to fit them in, like Cosplay Pikachu and the secret bases, but honestly I think it's about time I talked about some of the negatives. And yes, I did over-exaggerate in the title, and no game is completely perfect, but judging by the other remakes Pokemon have crapped out over the years, this is probably the closest to perfect you'll get. So what do I mean talk about some of the negatives? Obviously, during the transition from 2D to 3D, some of the original features were dropped for the remakes. Some good features were dropped for the remakes. And I'm not just talking about minor features here. Probably the biggest feature to be dropped from the original games was that of the Battle Frontier. Now, in the remakes, it was replaced with something known as the Battle Resort, which is fine, I guess, but it wasn't anywhere near as cool as the Battle Frontier. And I don't really know why they would get rid of it in the first place. Were they trying to make it more kid-friendly by removing pretty much all challenge from the post-game? Or was it to make room for some new features? Because if so, I'd happily bite the bullet and get rid of features like Sea Mauville and secret bases in order to make room for the Battle Frontier. And I'm not trying to imply that those features are bad by any means. I've just, you know, got my priorities straight. And this difficulty issue isn't just present in the post-game, this is an ongoing issue from start to finish. And yeah, I know, these games were made for children, so they're not going to be the most challenging games out there, but it's to the point where even kids would laugh at this game. Babies would find it more challenging to shit their pants than 100% this game. And I'm not trying to say that Pokemon games are inherently hard. In fact, the only ones that I actually had trouble completing was Pokemon Black and White. But if we're talking about difficulty, these games are just on a whole new level of easy. And the final thing I wanted to mention was that feeling of wonder that you get from the originals is completely gone here. You know, discovering the Mirage Island for the first time felt way more wondrous than finding them in Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire. It's sitting on your bedroom floor with a piece of paper and a manual, decoding whatever that cryptic shit was in order to get the Reggies, as opposed to now where you can just, you know, look it up. But yeah, if there was anything I missed, both positive or negative, do be sure to let me know, because as I said earlier, there are going to be things that I forgot to mention. So yeah, let me know. So after talking about some of the positives and some of the negatives, why is it that I've called these games the perfect remakes? Well, as I also said earlier, if someone were to ask for a Pokemon game recommendation, I would redirect them to Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire. It's just such a fun game. There are so many aspects here which make this game worth playing. It's like a normal Pokemon game, but with a bit more flair. You can fly around the entire region on the back of a legendary Pokemon, for God's sake. And call me crazy, but this is the most Pokemon game ever made. In fact, if you ported this game to the Switch and added a couple features like the Battle Frontier, difficulty modes, and maybe a toggle to switch between 2D and 3D, and I know that sounds like a lot of effort, but you gotta keep in mind, Pokemon is the biggest franchise in the entire world. And also, I know a good amount of people who would buy a game like this. Me included. I mean, I'm imagining it now. That is 50 quid down the drain right there. But yes, you've reached the end of the video. I've reached the end of my rant. So thank you very much for listening. If you do have any thoughts, like not even Pokemon related, just if you have any thoughts in general, I'd love to hear them. But yeah, thank you very much. This channel recently hit 1,000 subscribers, and you know, I couldn't have done it without any of you hitting that button. So thank you all very much for your ongoing support and your time, I guess, because you could have literally done anything else with your time, but you decided to watch this instead, so I really do appreciate that. Also, if you have any game recommendations, do let me know, because I'm literally only playing F-Zero 99 at the moment. So, yeah. Alright, love you. Bye.